Hi, my name is Karan McNeil, and today I will be doing a TED Talk on Black maternal mortality. This topic is very near and dear to me, one, being a Black woman myself, and hopefully in the near future, being also a mother. The statistics can be very scary, and the stories you hear, whether on social media, TikTok, Twitter, and things like that, can put different things into perspective that you might not think about when becoming a mother, or you don't think yourself you would be in. So let's get started. So the scope of the problem, some key factors: approximately 700 women die from labor and delivery complications, and that's here in the US alone, and that includes all women of all demographics. However, from 2011 to 2015, white women's deaths from labor and delivery was only 13 deaths per 100,000 births, compared to Black women who experienced 42.8 deaths per 100,000 births between the years, again, from 2011 and 2015. And as you can tell, that is a much bigger difference. And actually, I have a current statistic now. As of 2021, Black maternal deaths were 69.9 per 100,000 births. So as you can tell, this statistic has gone up, and not in a good way, being that Black women, just less than 10 years, has already increased 20 deaths per 100,000. The United States alone has had 50% increase of maternal mortality, and that's as a whole, as they began to study it years ago, even prior to 2011, 2015. From before then and then into now, we continuously see a increase within 50% of maternal deaths, and that's also across the board, and that's also in comparison to other countries who we consider as third world as well. For very odd reason, and people might not believe it, that some other countries who are considered third world or not as advanced as here in the US actually have low complications and maternal deaths compared to the US. Significantly lower. Also, 1 in 5 Black and Hispanic women have reported that they have been mistreated by a healthcare provider, and that was either due to their race, economic status, or their culture, or even their language. So these are some scopes of the problem of what leads to maternal death. But for instance, Black maternal death, these are some key factors that go into play of why we continuously see an increase. So a little bit more on the scope of the problem. The statistic that everyone hears is 3 to 4 times more likely Black women are to die in childbirth than white women. That is a statistic that has gone around year after year. Also, Black women, not only during birth, but they are also 2 times more likely to hemorrhage than white women as well. Also, in postpartum deaths with Black women are significantly higher than white women. So it is not only just in delivering the baby and physically in labor, but it also goes into a factor of the care that comes with after having a child. Black women are still significantly dying compared to their white counterparts. Also, again, with the postpartum, this can happen postpartum, but it also can happen during delivery. Black women are 5 times more likely to die from preeclampsia than white women. So preeclampsia is an increase of the high blood pressure that can lead into death to a very, very severe cases. Moving on to root causes. So why were the previous things that I've stated, why are these things happening? Why are Black women dying at a such significant rate? Why is it 3 times more likely, 4 times more likely, or 5 times more likely, depending on the statistic? Well, some root causes that go into factors are health disparities, being that it's social, economic, race, and chronic stress. Starting off with social, sociable, so that interaction with the healthcare provider and that patient. Do patients feel comfortable telling their doctor everything, knowing that sometimes doctors can have implicit bias on just what you look like, so that goes into a factor. Some people might withhold information because they might feel like they're not taken seriously, or they fear if they tell too much information, they can maybe put in harm's way. For economics, so depending on your social economic status in this country, you can be treated differently. There are statistics on that as well. Just previously, 1 in 5 women, Black and Hispanic, reported that they were mistreated, and race, social economic status, and language and culture, all of those went into play as that. So definitely economic status. It is more seen in this country. If you have money, therefore you have more access, therefore you have better care. Race, this is what we're talking about. Not only is it just Black maternal death that I'm considering now, but it is also minority maternal deaths as well. They are all higher compared to white women across the board. Black women just have the highest out of everyone. And chronic stress. Chronic stress is having to do with Black women and Black people in general, and minorities in general, having to constantly be in a fight or flight response, which means they feel like they're always on the go, no matter their socioeconomic status. So even a Black woman who is highly educated, who is a lawyer, who, top of her class, and another Black woman who, lower class, working paycheck to paycheck, both of them have the same rates of dying compared to white women. They're 3.3 to 4 times more likely to die from birth than a white woman. Both of them, and they're at 2 different spectrums of the patriarchy. So whether you are educated or not educated, or depending on your lifestyle as a Black woman, you are still subject to potentially dying. And that chronic stress, being that Black women know these statistics, that chronic stress goes into play. That's on them. But not only that of coming with a child, but also the stress of society, being in the U.S., the history of the U.S. with Black people, slavery, segregation, Jim Crow laws, prison to school to prison pipeline, stereotypes and everything like that. Black women and Black people alone hold on to that and have that, I guess, gloom hanging over them. So that stress and constantly being in that chronic stress actually does not do good with your body. So your body releases a hormone. It is cortisol, and which increases your high blood pressure. So if you're constantly in that state and it's never lowered, then that can deteriorate your health, and that can also lead to some bit of that preeclampsia as well. Some other root causes that happen during labor are severe bleeding, infections, high blood pressure, and pain. A lot of these things can be prevented, and that is a very major thing. A lot of this can be prevented, especially the high blood pressure and the pain, if it is caught early. A lot of times when these things are happening and a patient, Black patient, minority patient, informs their doctor, a lot of times their doctor, one, does not believe they are in pain, and that has to come from a history within the medical system, but we'll get to that later. But also that high blood pressure, there are a lot of tests and things in the medical field that the readings are different between minorities. We'll also get into that later. But a lot of this does come from doctors not believing a patient when they say something is wrong, I don't feel right, this isn't normal, this doesn't seem right. Basically going with a gut feeling, like your body it gives you responses when you feel like something is right, and then in the end, the doctors are not listening to the patients. And that goes into the implicit bias. So a lot of doctors and people, when you see somebody face value, we do have biases, and unconscious or conscious biases that can go into play in everyday life, but also going to play in the medical field as well. With that implicit bias, that goes back to the first bullet point, not believing a patient who's in pain, or they're saying something doesn't feel right, or they feel like they're bleeding too much, and the doctor ignores it because they said, oh, you're fine. That's an implicit bias. Instead of actually checking the patient, you just write it off, right? That also goes into play with culture in this country as well. A lot of people do not have interactions across cultures, so that becomes an implicit bias if you're only going based off of what you see on the news or you see in the media, but you're not actually learning the cultures, and you're not also adapting to those cultures as well to actually learn these people and their culture to better help you provide the best medical care for that person or those people. And that goes into the culture barriers. So a lot of culture barriers, not even just language, but mannerisms in different cultures are different across all playing fields. And if you are not accustomed to that, or you think it's weird, that can hinder you from providing the adequate care as a doctor to someone who could be high risk or who's not high risk, but during labor they become high risk. And then going on to the history of medicine. So going back to not listening to the patient when the patient's in pain, especially for Black people, and specifically what we're talking about now, Black women. Black women are not believed to be in pain because of the history of this country with the history of medicine. The history of medicine goes all the way back, slavery in this country to slavery, where doctors were experimenting on Black bodies with no consent, but also this is no anesthesia. So the operations that we have today, where we do save people's lives, we're practiced on living and dead Black bodies to get to where we are today. And within that, because some of these operations were on living Black people, they were in pain. But because it is deemed that Black people, Black men and women, children, do not feel pain the same as their white counterparts, comes in that doctors do not listen to Black women when they say they are in pain, or they say something doesn't feel right when they're delivering a baby. So it's very deep rooted, not even just with the health disparities, but things like this and instances like Black maternal mortality, they're deep rooted within this system, and it's going to take so much more to remove ourselves from the history that has been ingrained into medicine and has been ingrained into healthcare so deep that even doctors today who just probably got out of medical school still have a bias and still believe that Black women and Black men and Black people do not experience pain the same as white, or their pain tolerance is higher just because they are a Black person. And we know for a fact that that is not true. It was just the history of this country and the practice on Black bodies for the enjoyment and the education of medicine. Call to action. So what are some things that we can do to continue to not have this problem and continue to lower the Black maternal mortality rates? What are some things we can do? A step in the right direction, which has been in talks in our government today, healthcare coverage. So a lot of people who are minorities may not be insured. So there's that, or even people who are insured. Doesn't matter across the board if you're a Black woman having a child, whether insured or not insured, economic status, what have you, you're still about that 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. So healthcare coverage, that's a step in the right direction. We've seen a lot of countries who are just as developed, if not more developed than us, have free healthcare or partial free healthcare, or some type of healthcare system that benefits their citizens, to where their citizens do not have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars out of pocket just to get help. Because in this country, people who cannot afford to get help go without. So that means people who are just sick, but because they can't afford it and because they work, they cannot have that luxury of actually taking care of themselves and actually seeing a doctor. So healthcare coverage, free. We see, again, we have seen it done. We have templates of other countries that done it. So we just need to do it. And that could potentially lower the rate, honestly. But another one is access to those resources. So we see in low income neighborhoods, the resources to a doctor or to a quality doctor and to a good doctor is very low. So, or even just to a program that teaches you how to cook healthy foods and not cook with, margarine and lard and these heavy fatty things. Just small programs like that to help you better your life. They don't have that many access to those resources within their community. And even as a whole, going into the foods that you eat, a lot of these low income communities are food deserts. So the only thing that's around is like fast food and maybe a food line at Walmart, but if they don't have a car, it's not walking distance. So again, making that accessible to everyone can lower. You start with yourself. What are you eating? What are you drinking? And then going on to what doctors do you have in your community? What doctors can you go to? What doctors can you talk to better inform yourself of, your thing. And destruction of healthcare's roots. What do I mean by this? I mean, one, addressing the roots of the healthcare system, the nasty roots of the healthcare system and how it is still deep rooted today. And what I mean by destruction is, yes, we learned our medicine, and the medicine we have today is learned by them, but there are some things within it that needs to be erased. So the pain, saying Black people do not experience the same pain as everyone else. There's also certain tests, I don't know the exact name of it, but there is a certain test. For instance, there is a test that have organ donors have to do to receive an organ. There is a test that has to be done, and the number or the line of where a Black patient and a white patient can accept a donor and receive it, the levels are not the same. And we've seen, and there are studies about this, that if that Black person had the same number as that white person, they would get approved. Because their number is so much higher, they get knocked down the transplant list. So that's another minute thing, but very major. Someone who is on the brink of death now gets knocked down to the bottom of a very long transplant list because of the numbers, and just because they're Black and their number has to be higher than someone who is white. Going into that, with the destruction you have to build. So the new medical education. So making sure previous doctors who have been in this field 30, 40, 50 years need to learn the new education, as well as the new doctors we are pushing out each and every day. Meaning making sure we are teaching them about implicit biases, make sure we are having that diversity and inclusivity training, making sure we address their different cultures that you may come across working in this line of work. Making sure mannerisms are also being addressed between different cultures. A lot of cultures, they might talk with their hands, or they may have different symbols that if I don't know what that is, I could think it's weird. I could think they're trying to harm themselves, when in reality, that's just how they are in their culture. So again, that goes with that building that new education, that medical education, along with the destruction. And lastly, these are some of the sources and the suggested reading that I pulled from to do this lovely TED Talk for you guys. Again, this is about Black maternal mortality. And these are the strides. This is the problem, the root causes, and the strides we can do to further decrease the number of Black women that die each and every day here in the United States. And with some of these steps, in addressing the problem, we can definitely get to a place where we can diminish these statistics. And thank you for watching my TikTok.